Christmas dinner didn't just smell like roasted turkey, it reeked of betrayal so thick I could almost taste it. My son, Ethan Carter, stood at the head of the table, wineglass lifted like a judge about to deliver a sentence. His voice cut through the soft clinking of silverware and the polite murmur of conversation like a blade. "We've decided, Dad," he said, staring straight at me with an icy calm that felt rehearsed. "You're no longer part of this family. Pack your things and leave this house tonight." The room went silent so fast it was deafening. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere down the table. A few relatives exchanged stunned looks. Others kept their eyes glued to their food, as if witnessing a public execution. Across from me, Madison, my ever-calculating daughter-in-law, wasn't even trying to hide the smug curve of her lips. It was the kind of smile you wear when you've been waiting for this exact moment to land your killing blow. Outside, snowflakes floated lazily under the Denver streetlights, but inside, the warmth had been stripped from the air. The oak table between us, its wood worn smooth from decades of family meals, had suddenly become a cold, hard battleground. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. My silence was heavier than any words I could have thrown back. Slowly, I reached beneath my chair, my fingers closing around a plain manila folder I'd kept there all evening. I slid it across the table toward Ethan. "If that's how it's going to be," I said evenly, my voice carrying through the tension, "then here's my parting gift to you, son." His smirk faltered for the first time. He took the folder cautiously, fingertips grazing the edge as though it might explode. Every pair of eyes in the room followed his movements, curiosity momentarily breaking through the shock. Ethan flipped it open and froze. His eyes scanned the first page, and in an instant, the color drained from his face, replaced by a look that was part disbelief, part dawning horror. No one else knew what he was staring at, but I did, and so did he. In that single moment, the balance of power shifted. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea what was coming next. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? I wasn't always the man who slid legal documents across a Christmas table like they were a loaded weapon. For most of my life, I was a builder, both in steel and in spirit. I spent 4 decades as a structural engineer, setting beams into Denver's skyline and building a life for my only son, Ethan Carter, alongside my wife, Laura. Our house in the suburbs wasn't just lumber and drywall, it was ours. I had designed every inch. The wide front porch where Laura sipped her morning coffee, the bay window framing the Rockies in winter, and the oak dining table where we'd laugh through birthdays, Thanksgivings, and every Christmas we ever shared. When Laura died of cancer 3 years ago, the silence in that house was deafening, but it was all I had left of her. Every dent in the banister, every faded photo on the wall, it was the story of our life together. Then Ethan moved back in. At first I thought it might be a blessing, maybe we could fill the silence with something good. But he didn't come alone. Madison Carter, my new daughter-in-law, walked in with glossy hair, sharper eyes, and a phone glued to her hand, scanning every room like a realtor appraising her next commission check. The suggestions started almost immediately. "This place could be so much more modern, David," she'd say, tapping her manicured nails against the banister like it personally offended her. Ethan would nod along, rattling off ideas about knocking down walls, gutting the kitchen, replacing perfectly good carpet with sleek hardwood. They called it improvement. I called it erasing Laura. The breaking point came when Madison showed me a design board on her iPad Italian leather sectionals, a marble waterfall island, pendant lights straight out of some luxury loft downtown. The price tag for just the furniture was more than I'd paid for my first pickup truck. "Think of it as an investment," Ethan had said, his tone rehearsed. "We can refinance, do the upgrades, and boost the value." I knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't about boosting value, it was about draining it. And given their track record with money, I could guess exactly how fast it would disappear. For years I'd sacrificed for Ethan, sold my Chevy to cover his first semester of college, worked double shifts to help him buy his first home, co-signed loans when he swore he was turning things around. Madison hadn't been there for any of that. She saw me as nothing more than a stubborn old man sitting between her and the lifestyle she thought she deserved. And it wasn't just the house, it was the neighborhood too. Tree-lined streets, neighbors who waved, kids riding bikes until the streetlights came on. People who had known Laura, people who still dropped off Christmas cookies every December. I wondered what they'd think if they knew my own son was scheming to push me out of the home I'd built with my own hands. By December, the pressure had shifted from hints to demands. Ethan spoke about smart home systems and new flooring, like they were foregone conclusions. Madison's tone made it clear she believed letting me stay here rent-free was some kind of favor. I don't know exactly when my son stopped seeing this house as a home and started seeing it as a bank account waiting to be cracked open. Maybe Madison planted the idea. Or maybe it had always been in him, buried under years of my bailing him out. But by Christmas Eve, I finally saw the truth with crystal clarity. They weren't here for renovations. They were here for the whole damn house. The first real crack in the facade came 2 weeks before Christmas. It was one of those brittle Colorado mornings when the snow glazes the sidewalks in white glass, and the cold turns every sound into something sharp. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee into my favorite mug, when Ethan walked in, thick folder tucked under his arm like it was a weapon he couldn't wait to use. Madison trailed behind him, perfectly put together, clutching a designer latte and her ever-present phone, already scrolling as though she were bored before we'd even begun. "We need to talk about the house," Ethan said, dropping the folder onto the kitchen island. It thudded against the granite, spilling pages of contractor estimates and glossy photos of showroom, perfect homes. Madison stepped in like a realtor closing a deal. "These are options," she said smoothly. "New hardwood floors, open concept kitchen, recessed lighting. It would completely transform the space." I didn't even glance at the photos. "How much?" Ethan didn't blink. 85,000 for the full upgrade. But if we refinance... Number... I didn't mean for it to come out that sharp, but it landed like a slap in the quiet kitchen. He frowned. "You didn't even hear me out." "I don't need to," I said flatly. "This house doesn't need transforming. It's paid for. It's fine the way it is." Madison's soft laugh was dipped in poison. "David, it's charming, sure, but it's dated. You've still got the carpet from the 80s. "That carpet," I said, locking eyes with her, "is the one Laura picked out after weeks of searching. She loved it, and it's staying." Ethan shifted, his voice sharpening. "Dad, you're being stubborn. This isn't about the past, it's about the future. You've got savings. Why let it sit when we could be living better now?" I leaned on the counter, the weight of decades pressing down on me. "I sold my truck so you could start college. I worked weekends to help you buy your first house. You live here rent-free, Ethan. I've given you more than most fathers ever could." His cheeks flushed. "That's not the point. The point is you're hoarding money while this place falls apart." "This place isn't falling apart," I said evenly, each word nailed into place. Madison's hand found his arm, a silent little push. "We're doing you a favor staying here, you know, keeping you company, helping with the upkeep." I raised an eyebrow. "Helping? I shovel the snow, fix the plumbing, mow the lawn. The last time either of you cleaned anything was..." I let it hang there, but the silence hit harder than anything I could have said. Ethan slammed his palm onto the counter, the folder rattling like it had been slapped. "You think you're some kind of saint, but you're just holding us back. This house could be worth twice as much." I straightened, my voice low and lethal. "Worth more to who? You, Madison? Because I'm not selling it, and I'm not taking out loans to bankroll your shopping list." His jaw locked. "You're not needed here anymore, Dad. We can handle this place without you." It hit like a sucker punch. Across the island, Madison's lips curved not quite a smile, but enough to tell me she'd been waiting for this moment. I stared at my son, searching for the kid who once carved his initials into the oak dining table, the boy who used to tell me I was his hero. That boy was gone. I pushed away from the counter. "If that's how you feel..." I walked out, their muffled voices following me like smoke. My boots felt heavier with each step up the stairs. In the quiet of my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photo of Laura and Ethan when he was 10, both grinning at me like I'd hung the moon. How the hell had we gotten here? I'd believed Ethan would protect what Laura and I built, that he'd know some things were sacred. But the man downstairs wasn't after a remodel. He was after leverage. And Madison was after the deed. I opened my nightstand drawer and let my hand rest on the leather-bound notebook I hadn't touched in years. Back when it was filled with blueprints, measurements, and calculations, it had built homes. Tonight, it would build something else. This wasn't about decor anymore. This was war. That night, the house was silent, silent in the way only a Denver winter can manage. when the snow swallows every sound and even the wind holds its breath. I waited until I heard the faint click of their bedroom door upstairs before moving. The hallway creaked under my weight, the kind of familiar groan an old house makes when it knows its owner. Down in the kitchen, the light from the microwave clock threw a dim blue glow over everything. Madison's designer tote sat on the counter, mouth open, expensive leather catching the faint light like a lure. I didn't touch it. I wasn't here for her trinkets. Ethan's mess was where I expected it, scattered across the counter by the coffee maker, half-open envelopes and crumpled receipts. A lazy man's filing system. I began sifting, my pulse steady but my mind sharp, looking for proof. It didn't take long. First, a credit card statement, $12,480, $2 in charges. Half of it was luxury restaurants, boutique shopping sprees, and a weekend getaway in Vail. Madison's name was plastered across the receipts like a watermark. Second, a bank notice stamped past due in screaming red for their so-called investment property, the condo they'd bragged about at Thanksgiving, their ticket to financial freedom. The bank was one step away from taking it. And then I found the real gem, an email printout from a contractor. Subject line, preliminary estimate, Carter residence remodel. Total, $96,000. My name? Nowhere. This wasn't a renovation, it was a coup. I took out my phone, the camera clicking in the quiet as I photographed every page. Halfway through, a floorboard creaked above me. My body went still. I switched off my flashlight and melted back against the fridge, my breath shallow, my ears tuned to the slightest sound. Silence. Just the old bones of the house shifting under the winter cold. Still, I moved faster. In the dining room, I spotted Ethan's laptop, lid half shut. I tapped the spacebar. His email inbox blinked to life. One search for Dad brought up a thread with Madison that made my hands clench around the phone. We need to push this now. He's old school, won't fight if we make it about his health. If we can get him declared unfit, we get control of the house. No shock, no disbelief, just confirmation. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and pulled out my phone. Mark Henderson picked up on the second ring, still sounding like the man who could shut down a courtroom with a single sentence. "Mark, I need your help," I said. "It's worse than I thought." I told him everything. The smirks, the demands, the debts, the email. When I finished, he was silent long enough for me to hear the faint hum of his desk lamp through the receiver. "They're vultures, David," he said finally. "And vultures don't wait. You need to act before they make their move. Collect everything, paper, digital, whatever you can. We'll make this airtight." When we hung up, I opened my old leather-bound notebook, the one that used to hold structural diagrams and load calculations. Now it would hold something else. Credit card debt. Photo evidence secured. Past due a mortgage on condo. Photo evidence secured. Contractor estimate. Photo evidence secured. Guardianship email. Screenshot pending. As the pen scratched across the page, something inside me locked into place. They thought I was an old man they could shove aside. But I'd spent a lifetime designing structures that could take any pressure and still stand. Now I'd design their collapse quietly, precisely until the whole rotten framework gave way. And when it did, it wouldn't just fall. It would bury them. 2 days later, I stepped into the glass-walled office of Robert Klein, a man who could make a grown contractor cry with just a raised eyebrow. I'd worked with him years ago on a construction dispute, and he hadn't changed much. Still sharp in a dark, tailored suit. Still wearing the expression of someone who'd already seen every angle of every dirty trick before breakfast. We shook hands, and I set my leather notebook on his desk like I was laying down a weapon. "Robert, I need to protect my house," I said, "and I need to do it fast." "Oh." He listened without interrupting as I laid it all out, Ethan's ballooning debts, the $96,000 remodel estimate with my name scrubbed from it, the overdue mortgage on the condo, the email about declaring me unfit. When I finished, his pen was motionless, his gaze locked on mine. "That's not just greedy," he said at last. "That's predatory, and if they find anyone willing to back that claim about your health, you could be fighting in court for years." "That's why I'm here," I said. "I want to make it impossible for them to touch the house or anything else I own." Robert flipped open a legal pad. his handwriting precise and fast. Step 1. Rewrite your will. Ethan's out completely. If anything happens to you, it goes to a charity, trust, or foundation you control. No loopholes. Done. Step 2. Living trust for the house. You as sole trustee. That locks them out of any forced sale or refinancing scam. I nodded. And the joint account I opened years ago when I helped him buy his first car? He still uses it. Robert's brows rose. We freeze it, today. The next 2 hours were pure demolition work. Line by line, we dismantled every possible point of access they had. Robert drafted the trust, rewrote the will, prepared the freeze order, and even outlined a legal, bulletproof eviction process that could have them out the door before they realized what hit them. Then he leaned back, tapping the folder. We can serve eviction now, but if you want maximum impact, his eyes narrowed, you wait. Let them make their move, set the stage, and then you drop this in front of an audience. A slow smile crept across my face. They've already invited the whole family for Christmas dinner, planning to humiliate me in front of everyone. Robert's mouth twitched. Perfect. Just make sure someone's recording. When I left his office, the folder under my arm felt heavier than it should have. Inside was an arsenal. The new will, the living trust, the bank freeze confirmation, and a stack of printed evidence tying Ethan and Madison to every reckless, calculated move they'd made. I headed straight to the bank. The young banker behind the desk straightened his crooked tie when I handed him the freeze order. He typed quickly, glanced at the screen, and then printed a single-page confirmation. All set, Mr. Carter. The account is locked. Only you can reopen it. Oh, I thanked him, sliding the slip into the folder. I could already see Ethan's face when his card was declined, first confusion, then that flash of panic he couldn't hide. That night, I sat at the oak dining table, the same one where Ethan had carved his initials at 10 years old and laid everything out in order. Eviction notice first, account freeze next, then the debts, the foreclosure notice, the remodel estimate, the email about guardianship, and finally, the transcript of their plan to force me out. Each page was a brick. Together, they weren't just a wall, they were a fortress. I closed the folder, my hands steady, my heartbeat calm. The plan was built, and in 4 days at Christmas dinner, it would be time to watch it collapse right on top of them. On the morning of Christmas Eve, snow was falling in heavy, deliberate sheets over Denver, the kind that swallows sound and blurs the world into a watercolor of white and shadow. Across the street, the houses were nothing but faint outlines. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed across the table. It was Sarah Miller, Laura's oldest friend, the kind of woman who only called early if something was on fire. David, she said without preamble, her voice low, urgent. I heard something you need to know. It's about tomorrow night. I set my mug down. Go ahead. They've invited everyone, your sister-in-law Susan, the Fort Collins cousins, even a couple of neighbors. Madison's been telling people you're not well, that you can't manage your money or the house anymore. They're planning to use Christmas dinner to push for guardianship. The words slid into place like the final piece of a puzzle I'd already been working on. I wasn't shocked. If anything, I was almost relieved to have confirmation. They think if they corner you in front of the whole family, they'll get the momentum, Sarah said. Susan's already halfway convinced. Ethan's telling her you need help. I gave a short, humorless laugh. Help, that's one word for it. It's cruel, David. You need to be ready. My eyes drifted to the folder on the table, its edges aligned, its contents stacked in perfect order. I'm ready, I said quietly. More than they think. We talked a few more minutes, but I was already somewhere else, running the dinner like a blueprint in my head. Seating arrangements, angles of sight, the exact moment I'd strike. They wanted a stage. I'd let them build it, dress it, light it, and then I'd pull it right out from under them. After we hung up, I printed the last pieces. Madison's text to a friend bragging about getting the old man out, like it was some kind of sport. I made 3 extra copies of the eviction notice and the bank freeze confirmation. Every page went into a plastic sleeve. I labeled each tab like a contractor, labeling Beam's order mattered. That night, I heard them downstairs. Ethan's voice was low but edged with excitement. Tomorrow's the night. He won't know what hit him. Madison laughed a soft, satisfied sound that made my jaw clench. In my room, in the dark, I smiled. They thought I was walking into their trap. But the truth was simpler. I was the one building it, and they were already standing in the middle. The dining room glowed beneath the chandelier's warm light, the air thick with the mingled scents of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and tension. Outside, snow blanketed Denver in silence, smothering every sound. Inside, Laura's china gleamed on the table, every plate, cup, and fork she'd once chosen with such care. It should have been a scene of home and comfort, but tonight it felt like a stage, lit and dressed for someone else's performance. The guests were already in place when I stepped in. My sister-in-law Susan gave me a smile so small it barely existed. The cousins shifted in their chairs, eyes flicking between me and Ethan. At the head of the table, Ethan stood with a wine glass, shoulders squared, while Madison sat beside him, her posture perfect, her gaze locked on me like a sniper's scope. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his tone practiced, the rhythm too polished to be spontaneous. "This Christmas is about family, about protecting the people we love. And sometimes that means making hard choices." A slow, deliberate shift of every gaze toward me. Madison's hand slid onto his arm, a silent go-on. "Dad," Ethan said, his voice now lowered for effect, "we've talked about this. We're concerned about your ability to manage this house, and your finances. We think it's time you let us take over." I didn't give him the satisfaction of finishing. I reached under my chair, lifted the manila folder, and slid it across the table toward him. "If that's how it is," I said, my voice even but cutting, "then consider this my parting gift." He frowned but opened it in front of everyone. The first page, an eviction notice, made his eyebrows jerk upward. "What the hell is this?" "Legal notice," I replied. "You and Madison have 30 days to vacate my home." A wave of murmurs rippled around the table. Madison leaned over, scanning the page, her face tightening before she flipped to the next account freeze confirmation. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, but her voice had lost its velvet edge. "It's all there," I said, calm and clear. "Your debts. The past due mortgage on that condo you bragged about. A $96,000 remodel estimate with my name nowhere on it. And," I nodded toward the last section, "a transcript of your little plan to have me declared unfit." Ethan's color drained. "You went through my stuff?" "You left it lying around," I said, sloppy considering the stakes. Susan's eyes cut to Ethan. "Is this true?" It's not what it looks like," he stammered, but his voice cracked halfway through. Madison's mask was slipping. Her gaze darted to the guests, then back to the folder, her smile brittle. "We were trying to help." Help?" Susan's voice sharpened into something dangerous. "By lying to everyone? By taking his house?" The murmurs grew louder. My cousin Tom picked up the transcript, scanning it. He let out a low, incredulous laugh. "You actually called him a burden in writing." Ethan slammed the folder shut, but it was too late. The documents were already being passed around like evidence in a trial, the truth bleeding out faster than he could spin it. "You can't just throw us out," he said, his voice rising. "This is our home too." "No," I said, standing slowly, my chair scraping back against the hardwood. "It's mine. Always has been. Always will be." The silence was thick enough to taste. Madison's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto her plate like a gunshot. I stepped back, letting the chaos erupt without me. Voices overlapped accusations, weak defenses, sharp gasps of disbelief. Susan's face had gone pale with fury. Tom shook his head like a man watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. Ethan tried one last time. "Dad, we can fix this. We didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I cut in. "You built this mess. Now you can live in it." Madison's lips moved, whispering something to Ethan, but I didn't care enough to listen. I turned for the hallway, the muffled thud of snow against the windows louder than the storm of voices behind me. They'd built the stage for my downfall. I'd just burned it to the ground. 3 weeks later, the house stood empty. Ethan and Madison had moved out days before the 30-day deadline, carting their lives away in cardboard boxes and trash bags. They didn't say goodbye. I didn't either. The locks were changed the next morning, and with that final click, the siege was over. By month's end, I'd signed the papers to sell the place. The young couple who bought it reminded me of Laura and me in our early days, two people with big plans, hungry to build something together. I left them the oak dining table, the one Ethan had once carved his initials into. Maybe they'd add their own over the years, a history written in scratches and dents instead of betrayal. The sale left me with more than enough to start clean. My new place was a small apartment downtown, 2 bedrooms, big windows looking out at the Rockies, no one pounding on the door demanding money or control. On the first night, I unpacked one box, just one. Inside, Laura's scarf, a photo of her holding Ethan as a baby, and my old leather notebook. I set them on a shelf where the evening light could warm them. Then I sat at the desk, a blank sheet of paper in front of me, and began to write. Ethan, I've spent months asking myself where I failed you, wondering what I could have done differently. But the truth is, you made your choices, and I made mine. I forgive you not because you've earned it, but because I'm done letting you live rent-free in my head. This is goodbye. Dad? I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and set it on the table. I'd mail it tomorrow. Whether he read it or tore it in half didn't matter anymore. That night, I stood at my window, watching snow spiral down under the streetlights. Each flake caught the glow for an instant before disappearing into the white below. The house was gone. That chapter was closed. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight on my chest. Free.